She caught him cheating and walked into the night with nothing but heartbreak. One choice later, she crossed paths with the one man she was never supposed to touch. She went to forget. But the stranger she met that night was connected to the past she was running from. But some choices don't end at sunrise. They follow you forever. If you love emotionally intense stories where love is messy, powerful, and real, make sure you subscribe now. This story gets deeper, darker, and more unexpected, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Naya couldn't sleep. Not after the way he had cheated. Not after the way her heart still ached even though she had promised herself she was done. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty, and the memories of betrayal echoed in every corner. She poured herself a drink, the ice clinking against the glass, and let the warmth of whiskey take the edge off her pain. Tonight, she didn't want to think about anything, least of all her ex. She wanted to feel something else, something that reminded her she was alive. So she went to the rooftop lounge where no one knew her name. The music thumped in her chest, neon lights danced across the skyline, and the energy of strangers filled the void her heart had left behind. She leaned against the railing, letting the wind whip through her hair, feeling almost untouchable, almost free. That's when Kael appeared. He was impossible to ignore, dark and magnetic, with a presence that seemed to pull the entire room into his orbit. He smiled just enough to make her pulse quicken, a smirk that promised mischief, danger, and something she wasn't supposed to want. Bold, playful, unapologetically confident. He was everything she didn't expect to need tonight. Kael approached her with that magnetic ease, and the air between them seemed to hum. One drink led to another, and one laugh turned into a brush of hands, fingers lingering just a moment too long. She should have resisted, should have walked away. But she didn't. Before she even realized it, his lips were on hers. Hard, demanding, electric. She gasped against him, a mix of shock and heat rushing through her, her body betraying her mind. It was a one-night stand, nothing more. Or at least that's what she told herself. The world fell away as they stumbled into a quieter corner of the lounge, the intensity between them pulling them further. Clothes were discarded in a frenzy of need and desire. Skin pressed to skin, moans and whispers filling the empty room. Every touch was raw, every kiss a promise of something forbidden and unplanned. By the time they collapsed against each other, breathless and tangled, Naya felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. For the first time since the heartbreak, she felt powerful, wanted, and dangerous. As dawn crept in and the city lights blurred beneath them, they parted with no promises, no names, only the memory of fire, passion, and an unspoken connection that refused to fade. Naya walked away, telling herself it was over, but deep down, she knew that one night had changed something inside her. Days passed, but fate refused to let them go so easily. At a charity gala later that week, Naya rounded a corner and found him there again. Leaning against the bar with that same effortless charm, the same magnetic pull she couldn't escape. Their eyes met, and something flickered, recognition, desire, and something far more dangerous. Flirtation became teasing, teasing became lingering touches, and soon, the unspoken tension crackled in the air around them. Naya tried to resist, reminding herself of the one-night stand, but Kael had a way of drawing her in, of making every glance feel like electricity dancing across her skin. His words were a low murmur in her ear, playful, daring, teasing just enough to ignite fantasies she hadn't allowed herself to imagine in months. She knew this attraction was dangerous, forbidden in ways she didn't yet understand, but the pull was irresistible. Private dinners and stolen moments followed. Calls in the dead of night turned into secret video chats, and each encounter was a mixture of tension, teasing, and unspoken desire. Their connection grew deeper, more intricate. Soft kisses lingered a little too long, fingers brushed in ways that spoke of more than friendship, and every glance seemed charged with electricity. Naya began to let go, discovering a new thrill in surrendering to desire without shame, and Kael couldn't help but admire her confidence, the fire she carried even after heartbreak. By the time they shared a night in Kael's penthouse, Their passion had escalated to a point where fantasies became reality. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word was a mixture of longing and fulfillment. Naya realized she was no longer just trying to forget her ex. She was discovering herself, her desires, and the intensity of connection she hadn't thought possible. Before we continue, pause for a second. If you were in Naya's place, would you walk away or fight for this love? Drop your answer in the comments and stay with me, because what happens next changes everything. Naya told herself she wouldn't look back as she crossed the marble floor of the gala, heels clicking too fast for someone who claimed she didn't care. But she felt him before she saw him again. The weight of his attention, the way the air seemed to tighten when he was near. "You're walking like you're being chased," Kael said quietly, falling into step beside her. "I might be," she replied without slowing. "Then you picked the wrong place. I always catch what runs." That made her stop. She turned to face him, chin lifted, eyes sharp. "You don't know anything about me. I know you disappear before sunrise," he said, voice low. "I know you drink whiskey when you're hurting. And I know you're lying when you say you don't care." Her breath caught. "You're very sure of yourself." He smiled, just barely. "Only about this." They stood too close. Anyone watching would have seen the tension, the familiarity that didn't belong to strangers. She should have stepped away. Instead, she said, "This was a mistake." "Then why does it feel like unfinished business?" She didn't answer. He leaned in, not touching. His voice meant only for her. "Come with me. 5 minutes. If you still want to leave, I won't stop you." Her pulse thudded. 5 minutes felt like a lie they both agreed to believe. They didn't make it 5. The elevator doors closed, and the silence between them snapped. His hand found her waist, steady and warm. Her fingers curled into his jacket again, just like before, like her body remembered him better than her mind wanted to. "This is still a bad idea," she whispered. He brushed his thumb along her jaw. "You don't sound like you want me to stop." The kiss this time was slower, deeper, charged with recognition and restraint breaking all at once. It wasn't frantic, it was intentional. The kind of kiss that said, "I know what this leads to and I'm choosing it anyway." The suite door closed behind them. What followed wasn't rushed. It was deliberate, exploratory, full of pauses and quiet sounds and hands learning curves and reactions. They undressed each other without hurry, laughter slipping in between heated looks, tension building instead of dissolving. When they finally came together, it felt less like escape and more like collision. Two people choosing the same reckless moment. Later, she lay against his chest, tracing idle patterns on his skin, the city glowing through the windows. "This was supposed to be a one-time thing," she said. "It still can be," he replied, though his hand tightened slightly at her waist. She tilted her head, studying him. "You don't want it to be." "No," he admitted. "I don't." They started seeing each other quietly after that. Dinners that weren't labeled dates. Late-night drives with no destination. Conversations that stretched past midnight, touching everything except the one truth neither had said out loud yet. Naya found herself opening up in ways she hadn't planned to. About how small her ex had made her feel over time. About how she used to shrink to keep the peace. "You don't do that with me," Kael said one night. "Do what?" "Disappear." That scared her more than she expected. The physical pull between them never faded. If anything, it sharpened. Lingering touches, kisses that promised more later, looks that made her forget where they were. But so did something else. Trust, comfort, the ease of being fully seen. Then the truth came out. It was casual, careless. They were at a private dinner hosted by one of Kael's relatives when a familiar voice laughed behind her. "Naya? You know Kael?" Her blood went cold. She turned slowly. Her ex stood there, smiling like he hadn't shattered her weeks ago. Kael stiffened beside her. "You two know each other?" The silence was devastating. "He's my cousin," her ex said smoothly. "Best friend, actually." The room tilted. Naya stepped back, shaking her head.
No.
"No, I can't." Kael reached for her. "Naya, wait." She didn't. She left without looking back, heart racing, shame and anger and fear tangling in her chest. She ignored Kael's calls, his messages, his quiet patience. Weeks passed. She focused on herself. Work, strength, rebuilding the woman she had been before she learned to doubt her worth. But at night she still felt him. The memory of his hands, his voice, the way he had looked at her like she was something rare. When they finally met again, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. "You hurt me," she said. "I know," Kael replied, "but I never lied about how I felt." She studied him for a long moment. "I'm not the girl who settles anymore." His gaze didn't waver. "Neither am I." The space between them closed slowly this time. Not as escape, as choice. Naya didn't expect to see Kael again so soon. She was leaving a late meeting when the familiar presence stopped her short. The way the air seemed to shift when he was close, the way her pulse reacted before her mind could catch up. He was standing near her car, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking tired but steady, like a man who had decided something and wasn't backing down. "You're avoiding me," he said. "I'm protecting myself. From me. From the mess attached to you." He exhaled slowly. "I didn't choose who I'm related to, but I chose you." She crossed her arms. "Too late. Is it?" he asked quietly. "Because you're still standing here." That annoyed her. Mostly because he was right. Her ex didn't waste time once he realized Naya and Kael were still circling each other. He inserted himself everywhere. Business events, social gatherings, even places he had no reason to be. He spoke softly but poisoned rooms efficiently, hinting that Naya was opportunistic, that she was using Kael, that she had always been unstable. "You don't need this drama," he told Kael one evening, voice smooth. "She's not worth the fallout." Kael didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. "You don't get to talk about her," he said. "Not after what you did." The confrontation didn't stay private for long. At a high-profile fundraiser, her ex cornered Naya near the terrace, voice sharp with false concern. "You really think he'll choose you when this starts costing him?" Before she could respond, Kael stepped in, hand firm at the small of her back. "She doesn't answer to you anymore," he said clearly, loud enough for others to hear. "And for the record, I don't lose sleep over choosing her." The room shifted. That night, the tension between them snapped. Not into chaos, but into something heavy and undeniable. In Kael's penthouse, the city spread out beneath them, glittering and distant. He didn't rush her. He never did when it mattered. "I won't chase you," he said, standing close but not touching. "But I won't lie and say I don't want you." She stepped into him, resting her forehead against his chest.
I'm scared.
"I know. Of trusting the wrong man again." His arms came around her, solid and sure. "Then trust how you feel when you're with me." Their kiss was slow, deliberate, filled with everything they hadn't said out loud yet. It wasn't about forgetting anymore. It was about choosing. When they moved together later, it was intimate in a different way. Less urgency, more connection, like they were learning each other in a language only they spoke. From that moment on, they stopped hiding. Kael took her to meetings, introduced her without hesitation, stood beside her when whispers followed. And when her ex tried to sabotage a major deal tied indirectly to her work, Kael shut it down publicly, cutting ties that had existed for years without flinching. "You didn't have to do that," Naya said afterwards, stunned. "Yes, I did," he replied. "Because loving you isn't something I do halfway." She changed after that. The woman who once apologized for needing space now spoke with clarity. The woman who once softened herself to keep peace now stood firm. When her ex confronted her privately one last time, bitterness etched across his face. She didn't raise her voice. "You lost me when you decided I was disposable," she said calmly. "I'm not the same woman you cheated on." And she walked away. Kael watched her from across the room, pride unmistakable in his eyes. By the time the night ended, she was in his arms again, laughter replacing fear, desire wrapped in trust. Whatever storm had followed them had only strengthened what they were building. And for the first time since everything began, Naya stopped wondering how it would end. She already knew. The decision didn't come with fireworks or dramatic speeches. It came quietly, on an ordinary evening, when Naya was barefoot in Kael's kitchen, hair wrapped in a scarf, scrolling through emails while he watched her from the doorway like he was memorizing the moment. "You're different," he said. She glanced up. "From when?" "From the night we met. From the woman who walked out of my life when the truth came out." She set her phone down. "That woman was scared. And this one, she knows what she deserves." He crossed the room in 2 steps and took her hands, thumbs brushing over her knuckles. "Then let me be someone who deserves you too." He didn't kneel right away. He searched her face first, like he needed permission from the woman she had become, not the one she used to be. When he finally asked, it wasn't flashy. It was sincere, steady, certain. "Yes," she said before he even finished. "I choose you." They didn't announce it immediately. They protected it first, letting the idea of forever settle between them. But secrets had a way of surfacing, and when word spread, her ex reacted exactly how she expected, poorly. He sent messages she didn't reply to, made phone calls that went unanswered. Then came the interference. Vendors suddenly became unavailable. A venue canceled without explanation. Anonymous tips began circulating, hinting that Kael's engagement was a mistake, that his judgment was compromised. "This is him," Naya said one night, exhausted. "He wants to ruin this." Kael cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "He doesn't get that power." When the ex finally showed up in person, it was at a family gathering, his smile tight, his words sharpened just enough to wound. "You really think this ends well?" he asked Naya quietly. "You're just proving my point." Kael stepped in before she could respond. "You don't get to speak to my future wife like that." The word hit her chest harder than she expected. The ex scoffed. "You'll regret this." Kael's voice was calm, final. "No, you will." From that moment, the interference stopped. Not because the ex had changed, but because Kael had closed every door he could use. Business ties were severed, invitations revoked, boundaries enforced without apology. The wedding planning resumed, this time with laughter, late-night decisions, and stolen kisses over seating charts. Their intimacy deepened in quieter ways. Shared mornings, lingering touches, whispered reassurances when doubts crept in. On the night before the wedding, Naya stood alone in the suite, nerves buzzing. Kael joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Still scared?" he murmured. She nodded. "A little." "Good," he said softly. "It means this matters." She turned in his arms, resting her forehead against his. "Promise me something. Anything. If the world gets loud again, we stay like this. Us against the noise." He kissed her gently. "Always." The wedding day arrived without chaos, without interruption. The ex didn't show. His absence felt like closure. Naya walked down the aisle steady and radiant, not because love had made her soft, but because it had made her strong. Kael watched her like he was witnessing something sacred, something earned. Their vows were simple, honest. When they kissed, it wasn't hurried or desperate. It was grounded, full of everything they had survived to get there. Later, in the quiet of the evening, when the celebration faded and it was just them again, Kael rested his forehead against hers. "You're my best decision," he said. She smiled. "You were my rebellion. And my forever," he replied. As they disappeared into the night, hand in hand, the past finally loosened its grip. The betrayal that once broke her had led her here, not by accident, but by choice. And this time she didn't shrink. She stood fully in her love, her power, and the life she had claimed for herself.
If this story has touched you in any way, share it with someone who believes love should be chosen, not settled for. And if you're still watching right now, subscribe because the ending is worth every second.
Married life didn't soften them, it sharpened them. Naya learned that quickly. The morning sunlight spilled across their bedroom, catching on white sheets tangled around their legs. Kael lay on his back, one arm draped lazily around her waist, his thumb tracing slow, absent-minded circles against her skin like he had nowhere else to be. She rested her chin on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and grounding. "You're staring," he said, eyes still closed. "I'm allowed," she replied. "You're my husband now." That made his lips curve. Dangerous words. She laughed softly. "You've been dangerous since the night we met." He opened his eyes then, gaze dark and warm. "You didn't run." "I did," she corrected. "I just came back stronger." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss into her hair. Moments like this were quiet, intimate, but the heat between them never faded. It lived in small gestures, in the way his hand lingered when he passed her in the kitchen, in the way she leaned into him when he whispered something meant only for her. But peace, Naya learned, didn't mean the past vanished completely. The ex resurfaced months later, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to remind her he still existed. A mutual contact mentioned him bitterly, struggling. His business connections drying up after Kael cut him off completely. "You okay?" Kael asked when he noticed her go quiet. She nodded. "I don't feel angry anymore. Just done." "That's freedom," he said. The final confrontation happened by accident. They ran into him at an international conference, of all places. He looked thinner, tired, eyes sharp with resentment when they locked onto Naya's wedding ring. "So," he said flatly, "you really did it." She didn't flinch. "Yes." Kael stepped slightly in front of her, not blocking her, just standing with her. A choice, not a shield. "You won," the ex muttered. "Congratulations." Naya met his gaze calmly. "This was never a competition. You lost me long before Kael ever touched me." That landed harder than any insult. They walked away together, her hand firm in Kael's, the echo of the past finally losing its power. That night, back in their hotel room, the tension that followed them all day finally broke. Kael shut the door quietly behind them, eyes never leaving her. "You were incredible today," he said. She slipped out of her heels. "I wasn't trying to be." "I know." He stepped closer. "That's why it mattered." The kiss they shared wasn't rushed. It was deep, slow, full of everything they'd survived. The kind of intimacy that came from trust, not urgency. From knowing you belonged exactly where you stood. Later, wrapped around each other in the dark, Naya traced the line of his shoulder and sighed contentedly. "You ever think about how different this could have been?" she asked. "All the time," Kael replied. "And every time, I'm glad it wasn't easy." She smiled into his chest. "Me too." Their love didn't need chaos anymore. It didn't need secrecy or rebellion. It had matured into something powerful. Still passionate, still intense, but anchored. Naya had once loved from a place of fear. Now she loved from certainty. And Kael loved her not as a rescue, not as a replacement, but as a partner, equal, chosen, desired. The city lights outside blurred into something distant as sleep claimed them, the future unfolding quietly ahead. This time, nothing was chasing her. She had already arrived.